Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick here from Blind, and Jack is actually out of the country, so it's a solo show for me. We have Shirley Baumer, who's the Director of Product Management at Monday.com. At Monday.com, she's the head of building blocks and collaboration, and she was the first product manager at the company. For those of you that don't know, Monday.com is a work operating system. Its low code, no code platform democratizes the power of software so that organizations can easily build work management tools and software applications. And a cool thing to note, Monday.com is a publicly traded company listed on the Nasdaq. You might have heard of them if you're listening to this show. Thanks for coming on the show, Shirley.
Hey, sure. It's really great to be here.
So hopefully I did your background some justice, but can you walk us through your career for the benefit of the audience?
Yeah, of course. Beforehand, like I have to say that, my professional path or career wasn't really paved, I guess. I didn't have a strategy or a 10 years plan. Just things kind of happened in a way. So I think I can really connect the dots backwards. So maybe I'll start with the end. Today, I lead the main product of Money.com, our main product offering. We call it the work management product. So 10 product team who build our product, help. The mission is to help leaders to gain better control and set better strategy and focus for the teams and for team members to be more productive and happy in their day-to-day work. And yeah, so I started here 6.5 years ago. And as the first product manager, we were really tiny back then. It was a small startup, 30 people. And fast forward for today, over 1,500 people.
Wow.
Global company. We have offices in Tel Aviv, New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney, and more. And we used to have 1,000 clients. Now we have millions of clients. So, a lot have changed. So even the journey inside of Monday.com was fascinating because it feels like you're working in like 20 different companies. When you join as a first product manager in a small startup, so your challenges are completely different. It's more of what is product? People ask themselves, what is product manager? How should I work with that? Why should I care? Like, which value does it give me? So you have to establish that, give value, and then the company grows, and then you scale the team, and then you want to add, processes and all sorts of really big and interesting product challenges. How to transform from we started as a project management tool for small teams, and now like work operating system for some of the biggest companies in the world, and from a single product to multi-product, and lots and lots and lots of challenges. So really interesting path. And before I was a founder of a startup in healthcare, so something completely different. We founded Steps, which was we help rehabilitation patients to do their exercises at home, kind of to feel better, faster. So that was a crazy ride as well. And before I did multiple research analyst, consultant, business consultant roles in private companies, and also in the intelligence in the Israeli army. Yeah, that was
That's
TLDR
really
version, but feel free to jump in and ask questions.
no, I love that breadth of experience, right? Because you started the show and kind of had a very brief summary of your experience as, it's not traditional. There's the military experience, there's the intelligence experience, there's certainly the startup founder, and you're an analyst. And what's really interesting is, at least to me, because I don't work in product management or even on the tech side,
Yeah.
when I hear about a product manager's typical career arc, there are some folks that, went to business school, got an MBA, really wanted to focus kind of like on the academic industry side, and that's their kind of entry point into product management. Then there are the like scrappy startup founders who had to own product because they were literally the only person, and then they decided to go work at a startup or another company and work in product. Then there are the folks that come from consulting backgrounds. And so I loved seeing that like sprinkling of all of these different, like kind of quote unquote typical stories into yours. Do you find that that experience makes it easier to work with all of the different kinds of product managers or product professionals because you kind of have that blend?
Yeah, definitely. So that's why I started with like connecting the dots backwards, because it was often random, my path. I didn't even think about going to tech. I was already signed to um, um, behavioral economics in Amsterdam, doing my master's, and I have this plan in my head. I was a journalist, like lots of things. Um, and and then like I heard about this accelerator program that's bringing people from various and different backgrounds to solve like real world problems with big social impact. So my batch was around healthcare, and I started there with my background in like economics and research and stuff like that. And like I think few days before we presented the demo, the designers left. And we had to make a demo, like we didn't, and I didn't know how to do that. And I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. So I made this prototype, this mock-up in weeks.
Oh,
and
wow.
and it was quite good, I have to say. And I felt I felt it's interesting. And a friend of mine told me, everything that you do and that kind of, you love to do, and it's called product. And I was like, why? I never heard about it even. And from there, I kind of rolled. I don't know. So we went to the biggest hospital in Israel, and we presented this speech with the scrappy prototype I made, and they loved it, and we collaborated with them, and they funded us, and that's how it started. So yeah, it was more around like uh, being attentive to opportunities and to new ideas and to new people, and be curious also, I think, to explore new things. And yeah, I think with like a playful approach, it can fail, but let's try. It can be fun also. So I think it was something that also later on was very much um, in my path, in my growth during the
I,
year.
I, I really appreciate that story because, you know, again, from my perspective, it can seem so scary when you're working on a product, especially if you're at a smaller stage company or, God forbid, like a startup founder where it just seems like the stakes are so high. How did you have that confidence of saying, and that ability to just think, oh, well, our designer left. I'm going to learn how to do it myself. And we're going to approach the biggest hospital in the country and give that speech. How do you go from that step one to what seems like step a million in terms of difficulty level?
I was young. No, wasn't that self-aware. No. Um, I
But
don't know.
seriously, like
No,
looking
but I
back,
think I got like lots of mentorship, and that gave me confidence also. I didn't know anyone in the tech like industry, and there was this like program that I started that connected us to a few people, and also Google had this once a week open spot that you can meet people, like speed dates, like meet in I think 15 minutes, and that helped a lot. And then I signed up for like a user experience school and product school, and started to be part of communities and meetups, and studied a lot and researched a lot and tried a lot and failed a lot. So yeah, I don't know. And also I think that like there is the element of, doing the prototype or more the user experience or design skills. But I think that in essence, the thing that I started that was more like intuitive for me, of like really understanding the pain points and like talking to users and trying things out. I remember, like, for example, we we the product, like the product of StepSend, was some sort of a bot, which was very unusual back then. And but we believe that because we are approaching people that are often more, veteran, and are not always capable of or familiar of using, devices. So we wanted to do it in a conversational um, interface, which is more familiar. And then what we did was, we said, we kind of mimicked for 2 weeks. We said, okay, I'll be a physiotherapist and you'll be the patient, and let's talk on WhatsApp. And I'll give you exercises and you'll respond, and let's understand the dynamic. And from there we kind of took, the script. And when I think about it today, it's like, it's amazing. Like, I would recommend this methodology to my product managers today. But it was very intuitive, and I think, yeah. So I think like the essence of really, really understanding people's pain points, and going deep and try to solve it in various ways and not be attached to the solution, but be very attached to the problem, is something that was very intuitive but very deep. And also today, I think it's one of, my strengths as a professional.
I'm really fascinated because you say it's intuitive to you, but I speak with so many tech professionals, so many even product executives, and it seems to me that it can almost be intimidating to speak to a customer or speak to a user, right? If you go on Blind or if you go on Google and search, it's one of the most commonly asked questions because so many people are stuck by it. Like, how do I conduct this user research? How do I even speak to a customer? What are the questions that I should ask? How is it actually even helpful or useful? But for you, it just seemed so natural. Why do you think that it kind of came easy to you versus, it just might be kind of a harder skill for others to learn?
Yeah. Um,
Is there something in your background or,
yeah.
something that kind of you experienced
So,
firsthand?
like, first of all, I forgot to mention, but I was also a journalist.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so I think that a lot of, the ability to talk to people, to ask questions, to ask like open-ended questions and really get to the essence of things and get above the superficial things that people like to say about themselves. I think it's a very important skill for product person as well. So I think it gave me like the confidence. Um, um, I don't know. I think it's like a little bit of like a childlike trait, to be curious, to ask questions, don't be afraid to sound silly a little bit, or yeah, I think it's an
I,
important skill.
I appreciate that reminder because, you had all of these diverse experiences. You were kind of tiptoeing a little bit into tech. You had a friend or a mentor that came to you and said, like, Shirley, all of the things that you're doing, um, they're actually called product. How did you react when your friend told you that? And when did you kind of finally say to yourself, okay, if this is called product, I'm going to learn all of the kind of quote unquote like hard skills or more about this discipline or function and really, take the effort because, now we know, fast forward, you became the first product manager at a hot startup that eventually became public and had its IPO, right? Which is kind of like the dream for so many tech professionals.
Yeah.
How did you go from like that point A to kind of point Z?
um, so first of all, like you asked, when was that point? So I think like 5 minutes later. I Googled it and then I find this course. I signed up, studied it more professionally, um, and it was great because I learned how to do it, and at the same time, I was actually building a product. I didn't have any of my startup, so it was in parallel, so it wasn't theoretical. I faced the challenges in a hardcore way, and then I had to figure out how to solve them, and I had to figure it out because we didn't have lots of funding and we wanted to move fast, and so it was kind of a necessity to do that. And what was the second part? Can you remind
Yeah,
me?
I mean, so like necessity kind of forced you to learn like what is product and how to be a good product leader. And you did all of this while you had your startup. And I'm curious, you were once a startup founder. What inspired you to start that company, right? And get on that path in the first place?
Yeah. Um, so I was in this accelerator program, and it started with, guys, go find problems in healthcare, which is really easy because there are
Oh,
lots of problems, but also find a problem that you can solve, which is a bit harder. And we had lots of different directions, and then we found this problem, that people who are doing rehabilitation, something happened to them, they're injured, they have some sort of medical condition, and once they go home, it's very hard to keep track of the exercises and like your daily routine. And it was mind-blowing for me because I felt the benefit is so big. Like you can go back to yourself and swim and run and play with the, I don't know, your grandkids, but you don't have to do a lot. Like you have to do, I don't know, 5 minutes a day so how do I bridge this gap? And I felt it was fascinating. So the problem was really interesting, and it felt impactful also because it influences, macroeconomics issues. It's not only something which is specific to a specific person. And also, I really felt in place. I felt in my element. It was really fun to work with people from various backgrounds, to think together, to create together, to explore things. And yeah, and like I said before, so we went to this meeting with the biggest, like the Swarovski hospital, the biggest hospital in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and they loved it. And we started to work together. Then we were like, okay, it's real. We really have something. It's not this little exercise that we did for the past few months. It's actually worth exploring. And we kind of rolled from that point.
Yeah, when you had that moment, that aha moment, the great meeting with the hospital, and you realize, oh gosh, like now this could actually be a business, right? It went from theoretical to something that could actually be real.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, can you take us through that moment? Like after that pitch went well, what did you do? How did you feel? And um, what was next?
um, it was the best feeling in the world. I remember that we get out of the hospital and we were like high-fiving, in the parking lot. And then we said, okay, now we have to to execute. Now we have to do it. We need to find developers. We need to make sure we can really, really make it happen. And I had an amazing partner. And yeah, so we found two developers that worked with us, and we did this prototype and explored in the hospital, did this experiment with real patients, with real physiotherapists, worked with the head of rehabilitation in the Swarovski hospital and the head of the physiotherapist department, and they were really passionate about it. And since then, it grew.
I mean, as you were seeing the progress, and it seemed like the progress came very quickly. You had buy-in, you had the investment from the hospital, patients wanted to work on it. You recruited some folks, so they were obviously excited about the opportunity to join a startup and work with you. Um, at what point did like it finally click that, oh wow, like there's some traction and there could be something more? Because obviously you've since left that startup to go work at other companies including monday.com.
Yeah.
How did you kind of make that transition?
Um, so yeah, it wasn't an easy decision to do this move. But kind of I felt that me and my partner, like it was a newer partner, like we saw things differently about the future of this business, and I felt that it was like a good time for me to work in a more I felt that specifically Monday, or back then it was called The Pulse, was a place that you can also be an entrepreneur, because you're the first product manager, and it's a small place and there are lots of opportunities to explore, but in a more, I guess, supportive and cushioned environment, that and they really believed in this company, like from day one. I remember that I came into the offices and saw lots of dashboards on the wall of like real goals and real numbers about, you know, our revenues and our goals and what's working and what's not. And I was like really impressed by it. And it felt people were like psyched about the pulse, and that was the previous name, and the impact they are making, and really believed from like when I joined that, you know, we had really like, I think 5,000 customers, something like that, that it's going to be huge. They really believed in it. And it was, I did a leap of faith, and it turned out well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, like taking that leap of faith, you know, some professionals, they're intimidated by the prospects of being the first hire at a company, you know, whether that's like one of the first employees at a company or being the first in a certain function or a business unit. You know, you mentioned kind of going in and seeing the office, seeing kind of the focus on like data and the metrics and that energy. But beyond those points, like what gave you the confidence to say, all right, this is the right thing to do for me in my career and my stage of life. And you know, I'm gonna join and help out with product.
Hmm. Um, so I think like it's not a trivial decision. Like I think it has lots of like pros and cons, because no one walks you through anything, and it's not structured in any way, and nothing is defined. So um like, for example, my onboarding task, if you will, like my first ever task in Monday post was the founders going around. They told me our CAC is getting too high. We need to reduce it, like the cost of customer acquisition,
Right.
which is a very broad challenge to handle, you know, and also how do you handle it even from a product perspective. And so I think it can be very intimidating, like how can I even do that? It's not like design this small feature, you know.
Right.
um, and then I panicked a little bit, and and then I was okay, so let's approach it like I approach lots of challenges, and I just talk to a bunch of users and ask them like, what does Monday do for you? What does Monday solve for you? Why do you even use it? What was your aha moment? What are the challenges in order to like improve conversion and make our messaging more accurate? And we started to work with this new marketing channel with Captera, and until then we were only like in Facebook. And so we were able to do this first scale. So yeah, so I think that the experience of being first timer also in entrepreneurship, and like this the mindset of a beginner, um I think it helped. And also like no one else knows how to do it. You know. It's not that
When
everyone really are super professional and knows all the methodologies and everything. So we learn together.
I think that last bit that you mentioned, it took me many years for me to realize that, you know, it's so funny because like especially earlier in my career and even kind of like towards the middle of my career, I looked up at, you know, my manager, the different executives, the founders, the CEOs, and I thought, oh gosh, like they're in those positions because they know everything. Or, oh wow, you're in a meeting and you know, maybe your CEO or a founder is talking about one like function, and then they go on from talking about finance to product to tech, and you think, wow, they're the boss because they have that breadth. But really we're all trying to figure it out, especially in a startup.
Definitely.
And And I think once I learned that, it became less intimidating. And it sounds like the similar story for you of, well, there's actually some room for me to kind of grow, right? And I can kind of explore, and it's almost okay if I fail.
Yeah. And I think that Monday is very receptive and even encourages, failure. Like try things, fail. It's okay. It's part of the process. No one like it's better to try and move forward than to freeze. And yeah, we're all learning together, most of the C-level in the company, like they never did it before.
Right.
Never led a company of $10 billion. And so
So you were the first product manager. Now you're a director of product management. Can you kind of give us a sneak peek or behind the scenes look in terms of how Monday.com's product management function has changed over time from just being you to having a whole team, having some more experienced folks, having some folks from different tech companies or other companies join? How has it evolved over time?
yeah, sure. um so yeah, it was just me in the beginning,
Right.
and we hired two more product, and then it was a little bit like everything was like up for grabs. Some developer did some feature, and then I worked with them, and then my colleague, and it was more okay, let's do stuff. Not in a very structured way. And I think a year after I joined, we started to work in a model that we call task forces, which is kind of temporary teams that are focused on a specific mission, a specific API, like ultra focused on achieving that. And then kind of was the first evolution of product management from a function that, builds feature to a function that sets that really like connect the team to what is the business opportunity, what is the problem we're trying to solve, how success looks like, much more than being like in the solution and writing specs and stuff like that. So giving much more room also for designers and developers and building it together. So I think that was the second evolution. And that went really, it had lots of advantages because we were able to move really fast and to make lots of business impact. But also when you're very much like have a narrow focus, so what about everything else? And then we felt it's not balanced, like we don't think holistically enough and long-term enough, and the challenges became more complex. And then we changed how we work to something that we call domain, like more permanent team that are focused on specific area, specific KPI, more long-term, more holistically, like you look also on quality and like small increments and like the vision and on everything. And yeah, and I think in this point we also like better established like the interview process and what do we expect from product managers, and things got more structured, I think. Yeah, and then it grew again. Like I think we had back then maybe 10 product managers. And then we understood this is also not good enough for the scale.
Okay.
It's really interesting because there is no one good solution. It's always the best solution for the specific phase you're at. And then things start to like, it feels really great and it solves everything that you wanted to solve. And then things start to break because the reality changes, because you have twice as much customers and twice the complexity and much more people. And then, okay, you need to change something. And so the second part was to have like groups, which also started the product organization started to be more hierarchical. It was flat, kind of, until then. And then we started to form these groups above the domain level, like above the team level, that have more holistic approach, holistic view, and can be work more strategically together. Because like the downside of working in a very segmented teams was that it was hard to understand the big picture and have everything connected, and everyone were in their silo, kind of. So the group really helped. Yeah, and the last phase, I think like a year something ago, was to create organizations above the group that hold like a very big theme or pillar, and they are much more independent, have their own hiring and processes and culture even. And so, yeah, things changed a lot.
I mean, speaking of change, right? You
Oh,
mentioned, and I really identify this because I find it quite insightful that there are only like the right things for the moment, right? And that you have to necessarily adapt. And what works when you're a small startup with maybe just a dozen of customers might not necessarily scale. And when you work at a startup or when you work in tech, or at least when I have worked at a startup,
yeah.
it always seemed like everything just kind of sucked. To be quite candid, right? Where like you always didn't have this resource, or something was seemingly always on fire.
Yeah.
And in the moment, you just think like, oh gosh, like why haven't we figured this out? Or how do we get to this point that we don't have X feature, or we don't have like this function as a job that will like just do it. Someone that's like done it before, not us, that's just kind of like winging it. And I mean, with your vantage point, looking back, I'm sure there were so many of those moments where along the way, you certainly felt those too. Um,
Twice a day.
really, twice a day.
Still, yeah, of course. No, it's
I,
hard because you're doing something. Yeah, like it's like flying to the moon and trying to build the rocket ship during the flight. It's very, yeah.
I always laugh because I've worked more of like smaller companies, startups, and I've just had that experience. Maybe not twice a day, but seemingly all the time. And when I go on Blind, I read folks at like Apple and Google, like some of the like largest, most famous companies, and they have the same problem. And it makes me wonder, like, oh gosh, like if they're so sophisticated, right? And they have like more money than God and like all of the smartest people in the room, then like what are we doing in tech? Like why do we love it that we're seemingly willing to kind of go through these hard problems every day, or every week, or whatever it might be, to kind of tackle these kind of like big problems. Like, wouldn't it just be easier if we worked at like an insurance company or something where like everything is kind of done already? Like, there's some kind of like
That's an
craziness, right?
interesting idea. Yeah. Insurance company. All right.
Right, where an insurance company or like a bank, they've been doing something the same way since like the 1800s or the 1900s, right? And they have these like processes and all of these rule books and playbooks that other people have figured out, and you're just going through the motion of doing it, right?
Yeah.
um so you've been the head of these like different business units at monday.com as they've grown, and as the product team has kind of evolved from just being you to having these different groups to these organizations. Did you find it an easy transition to lead these larger teams or to do your job as your scope increased?
Um, no.
So I'm curious, right? It's like, how did you grow into these high profile roles then, right? Because I think that's kind of, we call this podcast the blind ambition because our audience is very ambitious. They want to get that promotion, they want to get that bigger paycheck, the higher stock package. They want to find the next like kind of magic startup that's gonna kind of blow up and become, a publicly listed company. How does one kind of scale up their career or kind of match that intensity of a company that's scaling and growing into these kind of like high profile opportunities?
Um, yeah, so I think that like we talked also about the entrepreneurship experience and first
Right,
time product, um, kind of embrace the fact that you're a beginner and you don't know everything, but also there are things that you know.
right,
And kind of try to hold on to them. So you know how to build good products and the craft around that. So if you know how to do it, and so you can also help other people to do that. And and you know how to listen to people,
right,
right? So it can be users and it can be your employees, and understand them and understand what motivates them and what troubles, what is more challenging. Um, and you know the people around you. That's also something, right? The stakeholders. That's also an advantage of being several years in the same place. That um, stakeholder management, like in the more corporate term, something important. Like
right,
you can't only be inside what you do. You have to figure out a way to share the success, share the challenges. Um, so I think it changes according to your assets, according to your experience, according to your blind spots. But yeah, be patient with yourself about the fact that you don't know everything, but willing to learn, I guess, and be humble about that as well. I was my first role as a manager. I didn't think I am the most veteran manager ever. I knew that it was my first role as a manager,
right,
and and it was okay. Like, and also, yeah, for each one of you, you have your strength. You have the things that you know how to do. And and also what we said before, right? Like it's not that everyone got everything figured out. Like everyone learns how to do things, and everyone have their insecurities. And yeah, so I think, like, yeah, and focus on what matters. Like focus on the work, focus on the impact, and not on like politics and he said that, she said that. And I think that often we're really um triggered but by what people say and what people do, and he got promoted and she got, why didn't I, and he did that. And so, like, focus on impact, focus on what matters, do your job, communicate it also, okay, not like in silence, but it will come. I think I think it will come better than try to be the best politician, you know.
no, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate your humility. So now I'm curious, right? Like you seem like a great boss. Can you give us some kind of insider tips into what it's like to work for you? Like what does the job interview process look like at monday.com? What skills are you looking for? How do I stand out and get that extra edge if I want to get a job at Monday?
So I'll share maybe specifically for product management, but then we have also things that are more common, I guess, for lots of other roles in Monday.
Right.
Um, we have two more professional interviews that are focused on the core traits of how we see product management. So the first one, we call it product sense. It's kind of the basics of product, how to identify a business opportunity, what are the problems, how to translate it into a product, how to define a success. And we are really in the interview process, we really build the product together.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
On the spot. Like I make up a specific opportunity area, and then like we do brainstorming, we think together. And then there, the most important part is just to share how you think. Like there isn't any right answer, but be very, yeah, methodological. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I'm not a native speaker.
No.
Yeah. About how you approach it. So first of all, to think about the market and the opportunities, and then to think about to map like the different, personas and the problems, and to think about several solutions, and to be very verbal about trade-offs, right? Why did you decided to go in this path and not in this path? So like this is the flow of the interview, and like the more soft things would be kind of how you accept feedback
Okay.
during
So
the
it
interview.
so it's
Yeah,
it's
like
like completely collaborative. You're on the spot and you're getting feedback in real time.
yeah, you're getting
Wow.
feedback, and we want to see that you know how to handle feedback. Like you don't push back, but also you don't accept it blindly. So we want to see that you listen and you decide if to take it or not and how to approach it. And so that's something which is very important for us. And also, like we look for people who are passionate about what they do,
Okay.
and we bring everything into what they do. So that's also important, like to see. It's sometimes hard in a job interview because it's kind of a stressful environment sometimes.
Right.
But like it's important to bring yourself. Like it's important that the interviewer will feel, I want to work with this person. Like he can lead a team, he can lead a group, he can lead an organization, whatever. But I want to go after this person. I want to consult with this person. I want them in my day-to-day lives. And another thing that we and something that is very important for us is we call it like impact driven, like people who think big, to think about big opportunities, big problems, and to be very aware of also the business side of things. And yeah, kind of like a winner approach. So I think these things are very much common in a lot of the roles that we hire for monday.com, like to be impact driven and be able to accept feedback or um, control your, I don't know, ego in a way, to be able to work with the team, like lots of time, specifically in product management. Like product management is like the leader role that, you know, says something and people follow, but
Right.
here it's very important for us that it will be like a team effort, and everyone will have a place, like developers will have a place, designers will have a place to bring their own superpowers to the table. So it's something which is very important for us. And it's also, by the way, how our organizations are built, like the leadership.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's product developers and designers, and we work together. And it's challenging sometimes, but we really believe in that trio. Because, you know, everyone brings their own perspective. And so it's not always like that in every tech company. For us, it's very, very important.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And while I'm just getting all of these like really good nuggets from you, I have to ask, are there any common mistakes you see product management candidates make in the interview process? Like, how do you usually coach them to improve?
Hmm. Um, yes. So it might be too specific for product. I don't know. But lots of time people like jump straight ahead to the solution, and they don't think about like the opportunity area and the business side and which problems we want to solve. So that's something which is very, very common. And that's one aspect. I think another thing, maybe it's a bit trivial, but it's really worth to prepare for interviews. And there you can learn, you can search it up online. And even if you're the best product person on the planet, like it's better to think about things, to research about the company, to have some sort of, you know, prep and plan for the interview. And not everyone do that.
Wow.
And I think the third part is around around feedback. I think it's a major thing that people like are very like give you pushbacks, or also the other way around. Like I said before, they're like, oh, right, and then they change like the direction completely. But I was like, no.
You're on the right track.
Yeah, just a thought, you know. So yeah, feedback is challenging. Like no one likes feedback, but
But I
yeah,
think
I don't like to get feedback. I don't like to give feedback, but I think it's the single most effective tool for growth. And although
right.
I like it, I get it several times a day. I give it several times a day, and we really have, uh, yeah, established a culture, I think, around it because it's so important. Yeah,
God,
because we don't know everything, so we need lots of like mirrors and reflections to get better. Yeah.
no, I like that. Because to summarize, right, like it's so important to take the time, and I think what has served you well in your career is you just don't have an ego, and you're willing to say, hey, I'm going to take almost like a child's approach to things, right? I'm going to focus on learning. I'm going to take in the feedback as I get it, and then I'm going to do better next time, right? With the knowledge that I've learned. And I think those are all important things that we need to keep in mind, because I think especially as like you grow older in your career, or you're like get more senior, there seems to be this pressure that you have to know it all and you have to do it all. And I don't know where that comes from because, you know, you've gotten to such a successful point in your career and you just don't have that ego and you don't have that pressure and you're doing so well. And so I really appreciate your telling the story of how you got to be the director of product management at Monday, from being the first product manager to being a director at a publicly listed company. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Shirley.